They said I'd never catch up. They said it in whispers, in glances, in the kind of silence that sinks under your skin. I was the one who missed the train, who lagged behind while everyone else sprinted ahead, careers, titles, milestones. I smiled at their weddings. I clapped at their promotions. I cheered from the back row. But inside, I was rewriting the story they'd already buried me in. It wasn't failure. It was formation. Not noise, but quiet momentum. They never noticed. That's what made it beautiful. My name is Rachel Morgan. I'm 34, and I live just outside Savannah, Georgia. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about what happens when no one's looking, and you finally become everything they said you couldn't. If you had asked anyone in my family who I was meant to be, they wouldn't have hesitated. She's the one going places. The smart one. She never needed help with anything. That was the image they loved. The girl with honors cords, a college scholarship, a flawless SAT score. I didn't just make straight A's. I made them believe I'd never fail. Growing up in a suburb of Charlotte, North Carolina, I checked every box. Honor Society, debate team, community service, early admissions to Duke. I was supposed to become someone important. Not for me, but for them. My dad, Tom Morgan, was a military man turned warehouse manager. He believed in grit, structure, and early mornings. My mom, Marlene, had never finished college, so my achievements became her redemption story. And my older brother, Jason? He just stayed quiet. He assumed I'd take the lead, and he wouldn't have to. No one asked what I wanted. I wasn't even sure myself. But I had momentum, and momentum masquerades as purpose, until you hit a wall. That wall came during my sophomore year. I was pre-med. Not because I loved medicine, but because it sounded noble enough to impress Thanksgiving tables. Every class felt like survival. Organic chem shattered my confidence. I'd study for hours, cry into my textbook, and still fail. By the spring, I couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake counting heartbeats, feeling like each one was too loud, too wrong. I stopped attending lectures. I started Googling things like what happens if you fail out of Duke and how to disappear without hurting your parents. Eventually, I did fail. Not a test, not a class, but myself. I called home. My mom answered on the third ring. "Hey baby," she chirped. "How's our future doctor?" I told her I needed a break. I couldn't breathe. There was a pause. "Just get through finals," she said, her voice tight. "We'll talk after." After never came. I packed up in silence. My dorm room empty, but for the shame, I folded into my suitcase. I told them I was taking a semester off. They told everyone else nothing. "She's just figuring things out," my aunt would say. "We don't talk about that," my dad muttered at a barbecue when someone asked why I wasn't back at school. At home, I was a ghost wearing old sweatshirts and fake smiles. Jason passed me in the hallway like I was part of the wallpaper. I applied for jobs in secret. Barista gigs, receptionist work, anything to fill the hours. Every rejection stung worse than the last. Even Subway passed on me. One morning, my dad left a brochure on the kitchen counter. It was for a local community college's vocational program. He didn't say anything. He just left it there next to the bananas. I got the message. They wouldn't say I failed, but they were done expecting anything else. I took a customer service job at a call center. The headset bruised my ears. The fluorescent lights gave me headaches. But it was money. I told myself it was temporary. Every time I walked past a mirror, I avoided looking. The girl they believed in was gone. When people asked, "So, what are you up to now?" I'd lie. Just taking some time to figure things out. Or worse, I'd deflect. Still breathing. That's something, right? But the truth was, I was unraveling in the dark, thread by thread, and nobody noticed. Or maybe nobody wanted to. 2 years passed like that. Work. Sleep. Repeat. No applications. No ambition. Just an eerie kind of quiet. I remember a Christmas where my cousin Daniel announced he got into law school. Everyone clapped. I was in the corner refilling the meatballs. No one asked me how I was doing. I didn't blame them. They had already buried the version of me that mattered. But one night, after a double shift and a soaked ride home, I opened my laptop and typed 3 words into the search bar. How to start over. That was the night it began. Quietly. Unceremoniously. No fireworks. No aha moment. Just a Google search and a stubborn kind of loneliness. And I started again. But no one noticed. It started with a typo. I meant to click on a YouTube video about productivity. Instead, I ended up watching a tutorial on how to install antivirus software for seniors. The woman in the video looked like someone's grandma, silver curls, oversized glasses, clicking with hesitation. I don't know why I watched it all the way through. Maybe because her hands were trembling like mine sometimes did. By the end of the video, I was crying. Not because of the content, because I suddenly remembered what it felt like to teach. Back in high school, I used to tutor younger students, math, science, even keyboarding. I was patient. I loved seeing people get it. Somewhere between pre-med pressure and panic attacks, I'd buried that part of me. So I made an anonymous post on the local community board. Free tech help for seniors. Patient, friendly, local. The next day, I got one reply. Just one. Her name was Marjorie, and she lived 4 blocks away. She said her son bought her a new laptop and she couldn't figure out where the letters go. I walked over the next morning with no expectations. She opened the door in slippers and a housecoat, blinking at me like I was a little too bright for her morning routine. Come in, she said, voice sandpaper soft. The beast is in the kitchen. It was Adele. Dusty. Humming like it wanted to explode. She stared at it like it might bite. This machine hates me, she muttered, tugging at her cardigan. I smiled. Then we'll make it our friend. It took us 2 hours just to set up her email. She kept forgetting her password. She typed with 1 finger. But when she finally sent her first message to her son, just 4 words. Hi, sweet boy. Love you. She gasped. Tears welled in her eyes. She reached over and held my hand. You brought my baby into my living room. I went home that day lighter than I'd felt in years. It didn't make sense to anyone else. I was still working the call center gig part-time, still scraping by on tips and leftovers. But I started offering more lessons. I printed a flyer at the library. Tech help for seniors. Learn to email, Zoom, browse, and more. By the end of the week, I had 7 clients. I charged $10 per lesson. It was barely gas money. But they didn't just pay me, they looked at me. With trust. With gratitude. With the kind of attention I used to crave from people who'd stopped asking about me years ago. Mr. Goldstein, 81, called me Professor Rachel. Ms. Laverne brought me stale cookies and stories about her late husband. Every visit became less about tech and more about connection. One day, I walked into a session and found 3 women waiting with their laptops. I told them about you, Marjorie said. They want to learn how to do that video thing. Talk to grandkids. I didn't have a curriculum. I didn't have a plan. But I had something else. Something I hadn't felt since I dropped out. Momentum. I spent my nights building a simple website on a free template. Just a logo and a sentence. Digital bridges, helping seniors connect 1 click at a time. My brother Jason found it one day on accident. He sent me a text. Didn't know you were doing this. That's cool. I stared at it for a full minute. Cool. That was the first neutral thing he'd said to me in years. And it felt like gold. I upgraded to a used Chromebook, bought a whiteboard from a garage sale, and started posting video clips online. How to use FaceTime. How to avoid phishing emails. How to check weather without asking Alexa. I didn't go viral, but I went visible. Every small win felt like a personal revolution. An old man logging into Facebook for the first time. A grandma Zoom calling her granddaughter in Germany. A widower learning how to use Spotify and playing his wedding song for the first time in 10 years. This wasn't what I'd planned. No stethoscope. No lab coat. No bragging rights at family reunions. But for the first time in years, I didn't care. I was building something I believed in. One shaky hand at a time. And it didn't make headlines. But it mattered. Within a year, Digital Bridges was no longer just a name on a cheap flyer. It became a local resource. A soft landing for people aging in a digital world that moved too fast. I had 32 regular students, most over 65. Some with arthritis, some with hearing aids, some who still typed like they were afraid the keyboard might explode. And I loved them. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I taught group sessions at the community center.
By summer, we needed more space.
A local church donated a back room. I bought 10 folding chairs from Craigslist, and Jason, believe it or not, helped me haul them in. He didn't say much, but he stayed an extra hour to help clean. By the following January, we were onboarding 1,200 seniors per month online. I added downloadable guides, short videos, and step-by-step printable tutorials. I didn't have a tech background, but I had something better: empathy. And empathy scaled. I reached out to a retired librarian named Sheila to help with admin. She became our program manager. A college student named Ray volunteered to edit the tutorial videos in exchange for class credit. Before long, we were a tiny team of 6. Remote.
Passionate.
Broke, but functional. We applied for a local grant and got approved for $18,000. I used half to upgrade our video equipment. The rest went to pay stipends. The newsletter had a 78% open rate. That's higher than some Fortune 500 companies. People weren't just clicking. They were waiting for it. One woman emailed, "Your newsletter makes me feel like I'm not being left behind." I printed that out and taped it above my desk. We were featured in the local paper. Bridging the Gap, one woman's mission to teach tech to seniors. There was a photo of me sitting between 2 laughing grandmothers, both peering at an iPad like it was a spaceship. That article led to our first podcast invitation. Then a panel. Then a partnership with a nonprofit that worked with veterans. I built lesson modules specifically for vets with PTSD, so they could video chat without triggering visuals or sounds. I cried the day one of them sent me a message. "Your module made it safe for me to see my son again." I didn't cry often anymore, but that one cracked me open. I knew we were making a difference, but if you had asked my family what I was up to, they still didn't know how to respond. At Thanksgiving, my cousin Ava talked about her new interior design firm. My Uncle Jeff pulled out his phone to show photos. Then my mom cleared her throat and said, "Rachel's still doing that tech helper thing, right, honey?" I nodded. Jason kept eating. No follow-ups. No interest. Just a mild silence. I wanted to scream. 1,200 seniors a month. Featured in a podcast with 80,000 listeners. Working with VA hospitals. 78% open rate. 5-star feedback. Real change. Real work. Instead, I just smiled and passed the cranberry sauce. I overheard my aunt say later, "She's always been the free spirit." And someone chuckled. Free spirit. Like that was the soft cover they chose to put on the story they never bothered to read. I stopped trying to explain. I stopped measuring my value through their nods and applause. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting. I spent Christmas Eve editing tutorials until midnight. My mom watched Hallmark movies in the other room. She didn't ask what I was working on. She didn't see that I was designing a custom module for a woman in Montana who was blind but wanted to FaceTime her granddaughter for the first time. That night, I sat at my childhood desk, the same one where I once color-coded flashcards for AP Biology, and whispered to myself, "You're doing something real, even if they can't see it." And I believed it. Most days. It happened at a wedding. Not mine, of course. My brother Jason was getting married in early spring. March, breezy and brisk, with pale pink roses lining the aisle like little reminders that time was moving, whether I wanted it to or not. He looked so sure, standing at the altar. I hadn't seen him cry since we were kids, but when Emily walked down the aisle, his fiancée, now wife, his lip trembled. I smiled from the third row, wearing a navy dress and heels I'd borrowed from a friend because I couldn't justify spending money on something so unnecessary. No one really asked what I'd been up to. I think at this point, I had fully been assigned the label of nice but sort of lost. Just Rachel. Not the achiever. Not the one making waves. Just there. During the reception, I sat next to a woman I didn't recognize. Late 20s. Wavy brown hair, lavender dress. She introduced herself as Claire, Emily's cousin, visiting from Vermont. We got to talking. Small talk, mostly. She asked what I did. I hesitated, then gave my usual soft answer. I run a little program helping seniors learn tech. Her face lit up. Oh my God. You're kidding. My fiancé's grandmother just went through something like that, changed her whole life. She leaned in closer, wine glass dangling from her fingers. She used the service called, what was it, Elderlight? No, Elderbright. That's it. She called us crying after her first Zoom with her sister in California. My breath caught. Elderbright. I asked, slowly. She nodded.
Yeah.
It's small, I think, but really special. She said the girl teaching her was like an angel. So calm and sweet. It honestly made me cry, too. I stared at her. The room faded. The music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses gone. Just her voice. And that name, Elderbright. She kept talking, not realizing my entire spine had turned to glass. She told us the program sends out weekly emails with video tutorials. Even had printable checklists. She was so proud of herself, you know? We thought she'd never catch up, but now she's using Instacart and YouTube and everything. Said she hasn't felt this independent in years. I felt heat behind my eyes. I looked down, folded my hands together to keep from shaking. That's my program, I said, voice barely above a whisper. She blinked. What do you mean? I created Elderbright. I run it. I built the modules. I write the newsletters. Her jaw dropped. You're kidding. I shook my head. I started it with one woman and a Dell that sounded like a lawnmower. She stared at me like I'd just said I wrote Hamilton. You're Rachel? Like the Rachel? I laughed, softly. Just Rachel. No last name on the website. I kept it simple. She looked stunned. Do you know how much that program meant to her? She said it saved her. Not just practically, but emotionally. Said it made her feel visible again. I couldn't stop the tears then. Not from grief, but from something else. Recognition. From someone who had no obligation to give it. I looked up and saw my brother across the room, laughing, holding a champagne. He hadn't heard any of this.
No one in my family had.
But in that moment, it didn't matter.
Claire saw me.
And through her, so did someone else. I excused myself to the garden. Stood by the fountain with trembling hands. The moon hung low, like a secret waiting to be told. I took out my phone and opened our testimonial folder. There it was. Thank you for Elderbright. I thought I was fading, but your voice brought me back. I'd read that quote 100 times. But now it pulsed with a new meaning. Because now I knew her face. I knew someone out there told her family about me. Not because I asked. Not because I promoted it. But because what I built mattered. Claire found me again later and hugged me tight. You're doing something amazing, she whispered. Seriously. I nodded. I didn't need to say anything. The truth had already walked in, uninvited, and refused to stay quiet. And for the first time in years, I felt taller than my shame. I didn't shrink. I didn't apologize. I just let the moment stay. Not because I demanded attention, but because I'd built something real, and real things leave trails. Even when you think no one's looking. A few days after the wedding, I got a card in the mail. No return address. Just Mom, written in careful cursive. Inside was a folded piece of stationery, the kind she used when I was little to write lunchbox notes. It said, Rachel, I watched your podcast. I don't know how I missed it before. I'm sorry I wasn't paying attention. I'm proud of you. Love, Mom. There were no flowers. No long apology. Just that. And it was enough. I didn't cry. I smiled and placed the card inside a worn paperback I kept beside my bed. The Gifts of Imperfection by Brené Brown. I didn't plan to reread it. I just wanted the note tucked somewhere honest. A week later, Jason texted me out of the blue. Mom wants to learn Zoom. Can you help? I stared at the message for a while. Not because it was shocking. But because of how casually he asked, like it was obvious I was the expert now, I wrote back,
Sure.
"Tell her I'll bring cookies." I didn't tell anyone this, but that day I showed Mom how to use Zoom. I felt like we were having a conversation we'd never had with words. She watched carefully as I showed her how to toggle the mic, how to adjust the camera, how to enter a meeting. She kept nodding, as if she already knew this wasn't really about tech. When I left, she handed me a small tin. "Peanut butter. Your favorite." And then she paused. "You've built something special." I waited for more. But that was it. And again, it was enough. The strangest part was, I no longer needed their approval. But receiving it, in these small, clumsy gestures, felt like finding an old photograph you thought had been lost. I'd grown so far from the girl who needed applause to feel real. Now I moved at my own rhythm. Not slow. Not behind. Just mine. I upgraded Elderbright's website to include caregiver resources. We launched a mentorship program. We even got a little coverage in an education tech blog. Someone called us a lighthouse for forgotten learners. I printed that one out, too. Didn't frame it. Didn't post it. Just tucked it behind my desk calendar. Because this version of me, this woman I'd become, she didn't need a stage. She just needed silence she could finally fill with her own voice. I started going on walks again. No headphones. Just sky. I stopped trying to explain myself in rooms that didn't ask the right questions. And I learned to smile when people said, "So, what do you do?" Because now I knew how to answer. And more importantly, how to live without needing to. One Sunday, I went to a little cafe I used to avoid because it reminded me of who I wasn't. Now, it reminded me of who I'd become. There was a woman there showing her dad how to FaceTime. He tapped the screen too hard. She laughed. "No, Dad. Tap, don't punch." He chuckled. She looked over and smiled at me. No idea who I was. But I smiled back. Because in some tiny, invisible way, I'd been part of that moment. And that was enough. It wasn't pride. It was peace. They said I'd never catch up. But I wasn't running their race. I wasn't late. I was becoming. Quietly. Carefully. Deliberately. If you've ever felt behind, like everyone got a map you didn't. If you've ever sat in the back row, clapping for people who never clapped for you. If you've ever wondered if it's too late to become someone they'll finally respect, let me tell you this. They were loud because they were early. But early doesn't always mean right. And silence doesn't mean small. Your life doesn't need to look like anyone else's to be extraordinary. You don't have to catch up to anyone to be worthy. You're not late. You're on time for your timeline. The ones who laughed, who looked past you, who moved ahead. They didn't see you because you were growing in the quiet. And the quiet is where the strongest roots go. Now, when they look back, they'll find you ahead. Not because you ran faster, but because you stopped running their race altogether. So walk your walk. Take your time. And when they finally notice, smile. Because you were never behind. You were always becoming. Quietly, powerfully, unapologetically you.